I went inside a room with 3 of my best engineers and logged it, like literally.
You started in 2006 within months or it took some time?
We launched this from our DSL connection, if I remember. I wrote a check to buy a printer for the office and the check bounced.
मेरे को लगता है पहला फंडिंग बैक माई ट्रिप दिया था.
He asked us to come and pitch. We didn't have enough money to buy 3 tickets.
MMT को कन्विंस करना कितना मुश्किल था
All the VCs who had said no started pinging us, and I said, I just met you 3 months back. What happened, right?
Again, life tested you guys. The COVID happened.
Some of the guys called them Cockroach startup.
How tough was dealing the COVID period?
Like we needed money to survive, obviously. None of us had money. इतने बिलियन से भी उधार ले रखा था.
A startup founder you truly respect.
If I have to name one, I would say most of the early startup days, people get caught in this vicious cycle of
Today's guests are two people whose journey has become a masterclass in resilience, Mr. Aloke Bajpai and Rajnish Kumar, the co-founders of ixigo. Hello, Aloke. Hello, Rajnish. How are you?
good. Thank you.
How has been the day?
So far, so good.
Okay. So before we get into, serious stuff, early life, school life, college life, and if you take us through that.
Well, our schooling didn't happen together, but I guess there's a large chunk of our career which we have been, like it's been what, 28 years?
28 years that
So
we
97 is when we got into IIT and 2025. So yeah, 28 years we have been like tolerating each other.
Okay. So even after the college, you guys work together or alag-alag?
Yes, we actually were hired by the same company, Amadeus in south of France,
Okay.
which was like a dream holiday destination. And then Alok went to do MBA. He had more money than me.
Okay.
And I continued a couple of more years. And then basically we met and we started.
And that's how we ended up with more money than me.
Okay.
So what was the trigger moment कि इसके साथ ही start करना है? Like this is the guy, like whom I can work with.
तो हम लोग
Choice ही नहीं था.
फिर भी कुछ तो दिखा होगा.
Just kidding.
हम लोग IIT में wingmate थे, right? In fact, our rooms were neighboring rooms, and we both had some common passions. मतलब Rajnish was in computer science, but I was also spending most of my time on a computer, and this was early days of internet, so discovering new things, trying out new ideas. That was something which we used to discuss about, and we were both passionate about. And we ended up at the same company when we worked, and we there also, we had a lot of very interesting things that we managed to discuss, do together. In fact, Rajnish in those days, in 2004, I remember, was doing an independent research work on AI and presenting a conference paper at MIT
Okay.
at the time when I was preparing for my GMAT.
That was a part-time research, and that was not like AI. I can tell you that AI was so unsexy back in the days that
Yeah.
nobody would touch it even with a stick in those eras, and it was a very traditional kind of AI. So it was about the domain of like doing cross-domain creative design using behavior analogy, which is something that nobody is interested in basically in today's world. Not even back then. So.
तो ये ट्रैवल कैसे हुआ?
तो ट्रैवल इंडस्ट्री में हम लोग काम कर रहे थे एमेडेस में, एंड देन मैं बिजनेस स्कूल फिनिश किया, और उसके बाद मुझे जो ड्रीम जॉब चाहिए थी वहाँ पे वो मिली नहीं, टू बी ऑनेस्ट. कंसल्टिंग में जाना चाहता था. None of the big four. None of the big four actually I got through. And I started thinking then, what do I really want to do in life? And that's the moment when I thought ki maybe, going back to India and starting something makes a lot of sense. So that's the first time we chatted about here. We have known each other for so long. We trust each other. And the fact ki travel tech mein ab, at least we understand the ropes, right? मतलब जो online travel just start हुआ था उस समय जब हम लोग Amadeus में थे. But we had seen how the industry had gone from a green screen to a browser. In fact, मेरा पहला जॉब वही था कि क्रूज बुकिंग को ब्राउजर पे कैसे लेके आए, क्योंकि वो ग्रीन स्क्रीन पे बिक ही नहीं सकता है. तो इस ट्रांजिशन को देखते हुए और इंडिया की ग्रोथ देखते हुए उस समय, बिकॉज हम पेपर पढ़ते थे तो हमेशा चाइना और इंडिया की बातें हो रही होती थी यूरोप में, आज भी वही है, बट back then we realized that if we want to do something meaningful in life, then we have to do something on our own. And India is the best place to do it क्योंकि अगले 10-15 साल में वहाँ पे जो growth आएगी, in fact for the foreseeable future, it will be far faster as well as more exciting, right, in terms of evolution as a market. So travel हमें समझ में आता था, टेक्नोलॉजी की अंडरस्टैंडिंग तो थी ही, और पैशन था कुछ बनाने का, तो वापस आके वही बनाना चालू कर दिया हमने.
So what was the time? कब ये
2006 की बात है.
6. I think he was on his way back from London.
Yeah.
And he decided to take a stopover in Nice.
Okay.
Right? And we met in Nice for a coffee with a couple of more friends. In fact, the idea was the initial, the seed team or the Inception team was slightly bigger, but in the end we were just like, came.
Okay. So when the platform was up, you started in 2006, within months, or it took some time?
Actually, that's the caveat when you start something, because most of the early startup days, people get caught in this vicious cycle of how do you get the money to survive? And so they end up doing consulting. And that consulting is such a vicious cycle that you would not be able to get out of, because it's so easy money, right? And you keep getting that money, and then ultimately the focus on building your own core product is lost. And
you guys also got into it?
Yeah, so basically we were like, we needed money to survive, obviously. None of us had money. The initial capital was, I think, almost close to zero. And we were all neck deep in debt as well, right? He had to pay his
B school के लिए लोन लिया था, वो पे ऑफ करना था.
और मेरी पर्सनल प्रॉब्लम्स थी लाइफ में, उसके मेरे पास मतलब करोड़ों के डेट थे, तो कुत्ते बिल्लियों से भी उधार ले रखा था गांव में. तो फिर then we had nothing else to do but to rely on consulting, and so we started consulting. I was spending most of my time as an interim CIO in another company, startup that we were consulting, which was paying the bills. And so I would not get time to focus here. Okay, that was pushing the plan out. And so 1 year passed by and we didn't have the product. And one fine day we sat down and we said, like, this can't be happening. Like, we didn't leave our jobs to build something, and like we can't be spending 1 year for nothing. So we took a hard call. We removed all the safety nets. I said, let's shut down the consulting assignment and let's build the product and launch it.
That was 2007.
This was 7. Yeah. Okay, so we did it, launched it, and that was the launch of the product basically.
So when you launched, कौन से player थे? Make My Trip तो था ही.
तो OTAs तो बहुत सारे उस समय फंड हो चुके थे, and Make My Trip was there, Clear Trip, Yatra, Travel Guru, bunch of players. Even Arzu Sabir Bhatia was doing something around that time. So there were a bunch of OTA players, but Meta Search, which is what we were doing, we were the first one to actually start looking at that and saying, okay, there is a space for someone who wants to aggregate all this information at one place and find the cheapest fares. So that is the model that we identified as our launch plan, right? And that at that time actually we didn't have capital to do much. In fact, it was a very, very small team. We were working from an apartment not too far from our current office here. In those days, Gurgaon was the most affordable place to rent, not anymore. But we launched this from our DSL connection, if I remember, which sounds ridiculous, but we launched it from.
So he was out there showing the demo to the investors, and I was actually in the office on an assembled computer from Nehru Place, trying to make sure that it runs on that DSL connection and there are no issues. And then investors would say, how is it running so fast? And if we told them that it was running from an office on an assembled computer on a DSL connection, I don't think anybody would believe that story.
Yeah. So we were very hacky and frugal from day one. Also because we actually did not have the capital, and we tried to raise money, and it was very hard to raise money in the early days, despite we had some pedigree and we had some experience in travel tech, but it was far more difficult to raise money than we imagined, at least because people have this bias, and that is still the case, that if there are some other companies in that space which have already raised money or are already growing big, why should we fund the fifth player, right?
So Meta ही क्यों choose किया? Because I think that was the first attempt in e-commerce space at that point of time. I think Jungly and other
they came much later.
Meta search platform for e-commerce buying and all, they came later. So Meta was the plan from day one.
Yeah, that time, if you look at the consumer problem, it was a desktop era of internet. People used to open 5 browser tabs, do the same search over and over again on multiple travel sites, and try to find where the cheapest deals are. So we were just trying to solve a consumer problem, and that consumer problem was faced by the millions of people who were actually that time the market size was not that big, but whoever was there wanted to actually have a place where they had the confidence that they were getting the best deals. But more than that, actually, we built something which worked really fast. So most of these OTA platforms were loading results in 30-40 seconds. We actually figured out that once we moved out of the DSL connection, we were co-locating our servers with where the airlines actually had the Navitaire servers, etc.
So if you looked at individual websites, the homepage itself took like 20-30 seconds to
Correct.
Yeah.
Now,
In those days.
In those days. So the customer journey was that you go to a OTA, open the homepage, fill the form, do a search. Search would take another 30 seconds. And then you see the result.
It was a problem statement.
It was a problem statement. And Indians, we are deal hunters.
Yeah.
We are value conscious people. We are price seekers, deal hunters. So we would go to multiple sites and search all of them. And there was enough critical mass of websites out there to be compared. And that is what the idea was, because we saw that Kayak had suddenly kind of started to grow in the US. And so we said, okay, how about we build something really fast that works and gets all the fares from all the OTAs and airlines in one place and shows them like really quickly. So if you think about this, like if it took you 1 minute to see fares from one platform and there are 10 platforms, it would take you 10 minutes. We would show all of the results in our platform in less than 10 seconds. That was magic. Like people were like, how are they showing it so fast? And the trick was that we reduced the latency to the APIs that we were consuming. And then we streamed all of that through Ajax using, and we built like, we're talking about a single page application in the year 2007. Okay, not a lot of people were building it back in the days.
मेरे को लगता है पहला funding McMy trip दिया था या फिर some angel investor.
Right. So first funding came from a Singapore-based fund.
Yeah, you talked about that.
And so I knocked all the doors in India, and there were not that many doors to knock back then. Right. Some of those VCs had already taken bets on certain OTAs. The others were too scared to take another bet in travel, essentially, to be honest, right? And angel and seed money also in India was not as abundant back then as it is now. So there were probably 3 or 4 angel groups that existed. We had pitched to all of them. The process was just too long and frustrating. And literally we got a phone call one day at our office landline. And I remember I answered that call and the guy said, can I talk to the CEO of ixigo? And I said, I am the CEO of ixigo, right? And he said, because he was probably expecting that we are a very large setup, but we were literally like smaller than this room at that time. And he said, I've been playing around with your product. It's very interesting. Can you come down to Singapore to pitch to us? Because we think that, this is something we like. The person who invested and actually built a meta search for e-commerce in Europe and sold it to Yahoo back in the days, 2004, I guess.
Yeah, 2004.
For $500 million back then. So he understood the space very well, right, apparently. And Norwegian guy, William. And he asked us to come and pitch. We didn't have enough money to buy 3 tickets for the founding team members. So eventually I went alone because that's the only money we had left at that time. We were down to the wire. I remember I wrote a check to buy a printer for the office and the check bounced. And
that was 5,000 rupees.
And that guy was standing outside our office asking for the money. It was embarrassing. But we were down to the wire. That the day we went there, I went and pitched, and literally the draft of the term sheet came the same day after that pitch. And investment in India didn't move at that pace. But globally it does move. For seed rounds, it moves at that pace. If you like something, you move. And I think in India now, that's the case as well. But it was tough to raise that first check of $500,000, which happened in 2008, February. Yeah.
How did it last? $500,000.
There is a very interesting story after that. The moment we announced our fundraise, all the VCs who had said no started pinging us, saying, let's meet for coffee. And I said, I just met you 3 months back. What happened, right? I said, no, maybe we missed something, right? Because that's how the investment world works, unfortunately, that you wait for validation from somebody else in order to say, hey, what did I miss? So, 3 or 4 investors started talking to us, chasing us, and we actually got into another term sheet for Series A within a few months of that round. And the moment we signed that term sheet, just like the classical mistake every entrepreneur makes, we thought we already had the money, and we started spending more than we should with the seed money that we had. And this was, we are talking June, July 2008 now. By the time the docs happened and the money was supposed to be wired, we are talking now end of August, early September 2008. You guys know what happened then.
Lehman Brothers happened.
GFC. And we were told this round isn't happening anymore, which is what happened to a lot of companies trying to raise money at that time. But it happened to us literally at the last stage. But we realized we had spent almost
like
2/3 of the money that we had raised already.
Yeah, almost all of it. And this is very typical because every fundraise brings expectations of growth, and then that's what you do. You spend more, you fast track your growth basically by spending more, hiring faster. Basically, you want to compress the spend cycle, etc. And so we did that. Like that was
Moved into a bigger office, hired a bigger team.
Hired bigger team.
Usual
Like
stuff.
we went from like 5-6 people to 23 people. Okay, started spending learned how to do marketing on Google, started spending money on SEM, all those things.
So when the next round happened?
The next round
Didn't happen.
next round was a bridge round where we had to put in money ourselves along with our investors, the seed investors. They were nice enough to say we'll put in more money to save the company. But that happened many months later when we had proven that we will still survive. And that's quite a story because we literally had 3 months of money left at that point if we were burning at the same pace. Jab ye story pata chali ki it's not happening anymore. And that day, was a monumental day for us because we had a meeting with the entire 23-member team where we told them what had happened very transparently and said...
But before saying that, we had a discussion ourselves because we were basically very scared about what was going to happen because not because of ourselves, we were more scared about what would happen to these people because we had just hired them like a few months ago on a promise that we are going to build a rocket ship. And then now I don't have the money to pay their salary, right? So like who's going to tell them? And we thought like, should we tell them or should we try and figure out a way to get out of this situation? And then after a discussion, we realized that, what, let's just be honest with them. Like just tell them whatever is happening. And that was like the foundational block of one of the cultural values, which is, empathy or trust or whatever you want to call it. So we just said, okay, let's go and just tell them what the truth is. And the truth was that we had 3 months of runway.
So they stood together or they just...
Yeah, so there was this junior from IIT Kanpur. We had just recently hired him. And I used to, crash at his home whenever I would be here.
Okay.
So, he was close to us. So he stood up, he took the lead and he said that, what, we don't have to do this. Like we are all in this together. We'll all take like 50% salary cut and we can extend the runway to 6 months or 7 months doing that. And then we'll figure out a way to kind of survive through this. I think we are better off together in this than like splitting ourselves in half and half.
And suddenly the discussion in the room shifted to how can we save the company?
Yeah.
Everything, like how do we increase revenue? How do we cut more costs? And everybody in the room was contributing with ideas at that
Exactly.
time.
In fact, I think Alok had drawn a P&L on the blackboard, on the whiteboard to show that we don't have money. And that was so much transparency that we showed to them that they understood that like we were in deep trouble, right? Bad news must travel faster than good news, always.
Yeah.
And in both directions, upstream, downstream, whether it is your investors or your people, whoever it is, make that travel as fast as possible. Good news can still wait because sometimes what happens is that you have a good news, you're too eager to share and that good news doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And so the expectation management gets screwed up, right?
Yeah.
And how long that funding crunch lasts?
Well, I don't think we raised more money till 2011 when the next round happened with the Safe Partners.
From
Elevation
2008 to 2011, like still the same situation or?
No, there was a bridge that happened.
Okay,
that
the
Alok
bridge
was
round that
talking about.
happened a few months later once the numbers started looking better. Investors who had come in
same
earlier,
Singapore.
the same seed investors,
Okay.
they gained more confidence about us and they also asked us to show a sign of support. So we had to, and we didn't have much money. We were not drawing any salaries, by the way, during this phase because employees were at 50%, we were at 0.
Our credit history was so screwed up that no bank would give us a credit
I don't
card.
think we had credit cards till 2011. Like, so we were basically maxed out, and we still had I still had personal debt from family members, extended family members, and all. I'm sure.
Yeah,
Rajnish
same,
was in the same.
Elevation happened in 2000.
Elevation happened in 2011. Elevation and Make My Trip invested in 2000.
How large was the round?
Well, they bought out also some of our existing, most of our existing angel/seed investors. So a total round size would have been about 18 million, but I think primary was close to about 5.5-6 million, if I remember correctly.
And how much percentage you diluted in that round to MMT?
I think Elevation had a larger holding. Make My Trip was about 19%, 19.9%. And Elevation was much larger, I think 40ish. I remember.
Yeah, they did all the secondaries were done by them.
So during 2013-14, the OTA thing happened, right?
So OTA came much later. So I think the interesting thing that happened in 2013 was we realized that we were actually building something which was relevant only for the top single-digit percentage of the population.
Okay.
Because when we looked at the data and we looked at the Google searches to begin with, कि लोग search क्या करते हैं इंडिया में, travel-related searches were largely train-related, by far, by an order of magnitude, right? And it started increasing even more when mobile started coming in around 2013. So when we looked at the data, we realized, yeah, if the market is that big from a usage perspective on the train side, why is nobody building anything meaningful there? And the moment we realized it, and we had traveled in train ourselves, right? Like things like tracking a train in real time, knowing if the PNR will confirm or not. These are problems we'd all faced ourselves, right? And back then, like we were probably the first company that empathized with these problems and tried to do something to solve them, right? The problems had existed for ages, right? So this is where the first pivot in a sense of the company happened, which is to say, shall we look at what's happening in the non-air side of things, where the next billion user tier 2-3 travelers coming and looking for train related information. They need now an app because Android had just come in, but there is no app there that solves their needs. And that's when, in fact, there was a hackathon that Rajnish and 4 guys went into a room and said, let's come up with some apps that solve for next billion users, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of an existential crisis at that point of time, because generally, whenever there is a technology inflection point, there is a risk of disruption. Every company sees that risk, and the issue with companies is that they just cannot, adopt that technology immediately and transform themselves. Like, it's not possible, right? Because especially when you become slightly bigger and you're growing, etc., and you've got bigger team. So our thesis was that, if you really have to reinvent yourself, you'll have to build from scratch using this technology as the foundational layer. And to do that, you needed to create a small company and a new company inside the old company, right? And shield it completely from the outside world, and then build using this technology as the foundation. Because if you did not do that, then there would be some small company outside who will do exactly that, and they will beat you.
Yeah.
And the reason why your small company will beat the other small company outside is because this small company has access to the resources from the mothership. It has access to people, it has access to capital, it has access to data and domain expertise. So this company is more likely to beat itself, like the mothership, than any startup from. Coincidentally, at the same time, there was a startup called Confirm Ticket, which was trying to do exactly that. They were trying to beat us by creating a small company outside. And so we created a small company inside, where I went inside a room with 3 of my best engineers and logged it. Like literally, it was locked with lock and key. It was a glass door. They could see us, but they couldn't hear us. They couldn't talk to us. Nobody was allowed to do that. And the rest of the company was called Oldco. And, Alok and rest of the people, they were running that team. And I was with these 4 people running this team. And our goal was to disrupt ourselves. How can you disrupt yourself? So we built something which was more or less exactly like Confirm Ticket outside. And then this company started competing with Confirm Ticket outside, which was growing. And then we grew much bigger, because our promise was not just about train ticketing. Our promise was that we were trying to genuinely solve customer problems. So the problem of predicting a PNR status, the problem of locating a train in real time, figuring out where your platform is, all of those things, like putting station alarm to wake you up, because I remember like I always used to land up in what was the next station after Kanpur? Etawah. I would always end up waking up in Etawah, and then I have to get down at Etawah and then take a train back to Kanpur. Because you just like it reaches early morning, you sleep through it, and so we invented station alarm thinking about those problems of train users. The reason, like we were talking about earlier, why nobody got into trains at that point of time, because there was no monetization in line of sight.
Yeah.
That was the reason.
I think there were several players like Rail Yatri, Trainman, and others. I think
Yes.
some of them got
Came
acquired.
later, yes.
They came
and
later.
Some of them pivoted as well.
Yes, all of them pivoted because nobody could really
Making money
monetize.
from train was really difficult at that point.
Yeah. In general, that happens with like almost all the ideas, right? So if you think about, even on flight side, we invested disproportionate amount of time, energy, capital building features, which still doesn't give us any revenue. For example, automatic web check-in, flight tracker pro. These are features that don't generate revenue. In fact, we spend a lot of time, energy, and money to maintain them and run them. But guess what? I mean, at some point, this is creating customer experience which is leading to word of mouth growth. It works in the long run.
And it also makes difference in experience.
It makes a difference in experience. So it's hard to figure out or measure that. But I think companies which are obsessed with customers, they're able to take such calls. When should you build something, right? And having the courage to prioritize it. And that's what differentiates them, because in the end, the companies that innovate, they're able to innovate because they're always looking closely at customers and their problems. And that's how they find the right problems to solve.
Yeah.
Whereas other companies are looking at competition to copy the features that they want to build.
Find a good opportunity in train space. Obviously, there is a huge scale, and no one was doing it specifically train. But on the other side, MetaSearch was running good, right? So what made you pivot into this completely full-fledged OD model? Was it not scalable? Was it not profitable? Or was it not backing by the good investors, or what?
No, so I think Meta had two problems. One was that it did not allow us to fix the problems that existed in the flight bookers' journey before, during, and after that booking, without actually becoming a transactional engine ourselves. Because we didn't have any customer, like Meta will redirect you and then hand off and wash their hands off that experience, right? But if something goes wrong on the OTA we took you to, and things used to go wrong, people would come back crying, saying the fare has changed last minute, I had to reach the call center, nobody's picking up the calls, refund, I have to chase for my own money for many weeks, and then I get the refund back. So these problems existed in the space. Because people came back to us and said these are problems, we said, okay, these problems exist, we know there's a critical mass of users who are struggling with this. Can we solve it ourselves? Only if we become an OTA. Right, so that was one of the reasons. The second was, Meta doesn't allow you also to monetize that well, because ultimately you are taking a cut of somebody else's cut, right? And over time, like for the same scale of traffic, at least that's our learning after pivoting, is that you can actually monetize it way better over time if you're actually able to sell more meaningful products that solve for the customer's pain area, what we call the peace of mind stack, ixigo, assured, and all these innovations. They are layered on top of the transaction. So the transaction is actually a way to build that trust, monetize the trust that we built with utility. But then you're able to layer another layer which says that, if something goes wrong, I'm here. You press a button, get full refund. You press a button, you can modify the trip. You can upgrade from a train ticket to a flight ticket. These products were layered on top of transactions. But to become a transactional company, it was a huge, I think, mental barrier in our head, because we were this pure play sort of Silicon Valley style tech company with only engineers, and it always was this thing, will we become this complex 1,000+ people company that most of these OTAs were, and will that be a boring business to run, right? As founders, like that was never exciting for us, that you explode exponentially on people and not really on tech. So the interesting point of time where it gave us the confidence to do this was when we had more downloads and traffic than any other player in the space, thanks to our train dominance, and the fact that we are not monetizing enough. And we said that at least on train, let's start by becoming an OTA. So we did not become an OTA first on flight. We actually became one on trains end of 2017, around the time when we had raised another round from erstwhile Sequoia, Peak 15. And that's the time when the realization set in that, look, let's get ahead of this mental barrier. And one piece of technology that allowed us to do that was Tara, which was another, I would say, ahead of its time innovation, where we said, why do we have to throw people at the problem for customer support when a lot of it can be solved with technology, right? So that gave us the confidence that we can do this in a way that creates operating leverage, rather than become this bloated company that nobody really wanted to build, right?
MMT invested in your company when you were MetaSearch, right?
Yes.
So now you're pivoting from MetaSearch to full-fledged OTA.
Yes.
तो MMT को कन्विंस करना कितना मुश्किल था कि एक तो वो आपका इन्वेस्टर है एंड ही इज होल्डिंग दैट कंपनी इज होल्डिंग MMT इज होल्डिंग अराउंड 20% ऑफ योर शेयर, तो उसको कन्विंस करना मुश्किल था कि आप तो उसके लिए एक अलग से कॉम्पिटिटर एज ए कॉम्पिटिटर क्रिएट होने जा रहा था, तो उसके लिए कितना मुश्किल था या उन्होंने कुछ आर्ग्यूमेंट्स करे? सो व्हाट वाज योर रिस्पांस?
See, I mean, they had one board seat and they had a minority investment, so it was more of it was not a control investment in that sense, right? So I think the choice was literally ours. If you ask the common wisdom from people who were experts, train was anyway not a category that anybody was excited about out there.
Is this the only reason you focus on train, not on flights or hotels?
No, so I think
because MMT was already there.
I'll tell you the crux of this thing. It's not even about train. It's about saying, okay, travel is an experiential category. For every line of business that we've entered, our thesis has been, if we can find customer pain areas that nobody else has bothered to solve,
Correct.
we can build a viable business. Transactions happen because there is trust established in these businesses, right? I don't think we exist just to sell tickets. We never did and we never will. Because that's a very low barrier to entry, low moat kind of a business. If you're just, OTA business is selling somebody else's inventory. You're a broker, you have supply who owns the inventory, you have customers who are buying it. The moat is really in saying, can I take care of everything that happens before, during and after the trip in a way which, allows you to enjoy that moment rather than be worried about all those downsides that can come along the way, right? That is what travel companies are meant to do. But I think there was a mad rush of growing transactions in the space for a long time, which thankfully we never got into. Right? The transactional growth came as a result of the trust we built by spending that many years building the right product, even though there was zero monetization or like close to zero monetization on it. But we didn't care, and I think that template gets harder to do when you have the resources, and it's easier template when you don't have resources, you don't have money. It's the only thing you can do, build a better product, maybe do more creative marketing. Once you have a lot of resources, the temptation always is to follow the easy path, right, for growth. But all the sustainable things we've done have been built by following the less trodden path to say, problems क्या है customer की space में solve करते हैं. And that's what we did on trains. That's what we are doing on flights, hotels right now.
It was never about being an OTA actually, if you think about it, because the way our business was built, no OTA in the world was built like that. Every OTA started by selling tickets first.
Yeah.
Correct.
We are the only OTA which started by actually doing post-book activities. Once you have booked your ticket, I'll tell you whether it's confirmed or not, or whether it will get confirmed. Once you're traveling inside the train, I'll tell you where exactly your train is, etc., right? So all of the things that we built, they had nothing to do with transaction, because the whole point was that every OTA in the world would obsess with only one thing, making people transact and collect the money. Every nudge that you have, which is last few seats left or XYZ, etc., they all point in the same direction, that everybody's very eager to just make a sale happen on their platform.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody cares about what happens to that customer afterwards, right? Everything we did was all about what happens. We wanted to own the customer journey end to end. So when you book a flight ticket on ixigo, your journey doesn't end by getting a confirmed ticket like a PNR, right? It starts from there, because then our agents, they go behind the scene, they figure out when check-in opens, they automatically check you into the flight. As soon as that happens, it will then wait for your boarding card pass to be generated. When it gets generated, it will pick it up, it will put it in an Apple Wallet or Google Wallet, depending on what you use. All of that happens, and we care about that because it improves the customer experience. fundamentally, right? And that was the obsession. We wanted to build a new kind of OTA. Like everything else also that we built, like you look at all the value added stack that we built, the peace of mind stack. It's true that these are value accretive. We sell these products and we do make money on them, which is a good thing, but it's a win-win. The customers also needed a product like that because there was no product that gave you the guarantee of full and instant refund without any fine prints, instantly.
Yeah.
Right? It did not exist, right? So we had to create one.
So experience has been the core of the ixigo product, I think.
Obviously, always. Customer obsession is the key. I don't think there's any company in this world which has won.
And you also focused on things which other OTAs and other players were, not focusing on or ignoring.
I mean,
experiences,
actually,
as you talked
Because we were not looking at them.
We were not
Because
spending
most
much
of-
time looking at what others were doing.
Because most of companies were looking at transaction only.
If you have your ears to the ground and if you're listening to your consumers and their problems, and if you genuinely obsess about solving those problems and building something meaningful and create an impact, you will almost always find the most innovative and novel things to build.
Yeah.
And the question only is, do you have the courage to prioritize it and build it, even if it doesn't give you immediate revenue?
Yeah.
That is what innovation is.
Sure. So, when the meta thing scrapped, when you guys abandoned it?
When we pivoted to OTA, so flights mein just before COVID, FY20 mein, around I think August 2019. Yeah.
So I think ixigo has kept the meta thing for almost 12-13 years. I think none of the other company in any space, I'm talking about aggregation space, has managed to keep afloat for such a long time. We have seen in e-commerce jungli वगैरह आए थे, but I think they likes of Amazon could not make it happen for a long time. So ये पूरे इंडिया में मेटा चला ही नहीं. मतलब if we look at aggregation model, I think it worked nowhere. Shopping वगैरह में भी कहीं नहीं चला. What's the reason for that? Because we have a global PS or we have a global example like Skyscanner, right? But
even Google does.
Yeah. But
I think
what's the reason?
No, so there is a subset of users out there who will see value in that because there will be deal hunters who might just start their journey there. But I think what we have realized is over time, people will end up on a platform that has the best customer experience, period, right?
Yeah.
Whether you started on some platform or the other, it doesn't matter. But over time, in any category you think in your head, you would have ended up on the app that stays on your phone, that has the best customer experience, whom you trust blindly. That if something goes wrong, I know this app will be there for me to solve they will fight tooth and nail for me with the supply side to get things done on my behalf. They will respond to queries fast. They will refund money. Those are basic things that people expect, but many people don't deliver on. And I think it just boils down to those small things which may sound very mundane when I talk about it, but even the hygiene at times is non-existent in spaces and people take it for granted.
Yeah. So even in B2B space, कुछ aggregation model successful हुए हैं. जैसे Shiprocket का model था. They used to aggregate couriers for sellers, merchants, जो e-commerce platform.
That is slightly different because if you think about Shopify as well.
Yeah.
I think that is not. I mean that's aggregation of a logistics or an infrastructure layer built upon fragmented inventory or fragmented ecosystem, for example, right? Small e-commerce companies, they want to have a uniform way to sell their inventory using a technology. Now, if Shopify built shop.app, the advantage for them also is that they are aggregating very, very critical data about what's selling on each of these platforms. And that's an insane amount of value that brings in, right? That's not the same as Meta. Meta is, by definition, is a platform where customers come because they have price arbitrage.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. And now think about it. Price arbitrage is not a long-term sustainable mode for anybody in this world. Okay? Yeah. Which means that ultimately, if you are going to go and sell a better experience, you're going to retain that customer and keep that customer, right? And so the value of Meta in the long term diminishes because of that.
Yeah.
And for us, the problem was not about the long-term value. The problem was the inability to service the customer across the entire phase of his lifetime. Because I did not have the control because I was not full stack. Think about everything that has happened even in marketplace ecosystems, right? Why did people, for example, I don't know, take an example. Urban Company had to go full stack in Spa or full stack in AC repair. Other platform, similar issues, like Uber had to get its own platform for drivers, right? They had to create their own onboarding system, etc. All of it is because all these companies who care about customer experience, they would have to eventually become full stack because they need to control customer experience if they want to guarantee a certain kind of experience.
So in 2000, I think 2020, when the pivot happened to full-fledged OTA.
Late 2019, yeah.
Again, life tested you guys. The COVID happened.
Just few months after that, yes.
Some of the guys called them Cockroach startup.
Yeah,
So what is
in fact, this term has originated in Silicon Valley, I believe. India में 2013-14 में थोड़ा सा coin होने लगा. And that term has been synonymous with ixigo. I think because you guys have proved कि
Because we failed to die.
सब मर जाएंगे, त्रिवेदी बचेगा. How tough was dealing the COVID period?
It was the toughest period of our journey.
Because you guys have been experiencing standstill for the first time. There is no business.
Yeah, we saw zero in reports. Like there's some reports that used to come on Slack, and we saw zero. And the thing was that everybody is sitting at home, working from home. So I was sitting on the bed, looking at the report, and then suddenly my Apple Watch alert comes that my heart rate is 120 while I was just sitting on the bed. So that was like a scary moment.
And I think there was so much uncertainty around how long this thing will last, what is this thing, and like, will it actually kill all travel companies? And then you had Warren Buffett selling all his travel stocks and all of that. So there was a general, negativity about what the future of travel is from there on. But one thing, like, we both, when we chatted, and this day when he had this alert, I think we had a late night conversation कि अब क्या करें, should we think about pivoting the business, doing something else? अभी travel तो कुछ महीनों के लिए out है, right? And we brainstormed on several ideas, and then we said एक काम करते हैं, सुबह फिर से बात करते हैं, right? Morning, I call him and both of us say the exact same thing कि नहीं यार वही करना है, मतलब at the same time कि यार क्यों कुछ और करें, मतलब let's solve कि अब problem क्या है customer की, वो identify करते हैं और वो सॉल्व करते हैं. और उस समय प्रॉब्लम कुछ और हो गई थी कि दो प्रॉब्लम थी कि यार नोबडी न्यू कि उनकी फ्लाइट का अब स्टेटस क्या, अब तो कैंसिल हो गई, लॉकडाउन है, क्या करें, पैसे वापस आएंगे कि नहीं आएंगे, अगली फ्लाइट कैसे बुक करेंगे. देयर वर टन्स ऑफ कॉल्स, वी वर गेटिंग 10x द आउटरीच, राइट. सो फर्स्ट प्रॉब्लम वाज हाउ डू यू हैंडल 10x द लोड in an environment where some of your team members may be down with COVID and all of that, right? So
उसके लिए भी एक अलग चल रहा था thread. There was a group created where we were supporting each other, helping people who were struggling with oxygen cylinder, blah blah blah, all those things. It was terrible actually.
That and the agony with refunds that we saw. So ये जो ixigo assured product है ना, ये लॉकडाउन में बना है, जब 45 दिन एकदम जो लॉकडाउन का चरम सीमा था, जब क्लोज टू जीरो रेवेन्यू था, कुछ करने को नहीं था, बट ये टेक में दिस वाज व्हाट वी वर वर्किंग ऑन.
And the lockdown was not like a general lockdown, right? The lockdown had reached a stage where there were temporal lockdowns happening in different cities at different point of time. So imagine you book your flight ticket and then you realize that उस डेट पे तो जा ही नहीं सकते, उस दिन लॉकडाउन लग गया वहाँ पे. So there was so much uncertainty people have in their heads about booking a ticket that they would rather not book it or change the plan. And so this Assured's purpose was to give that peace of mind. यार बुक कर लो, कोई कुछ नहीं हुआ, कैंसिल है, फुल रिफंड वापस मिल जाएगा. It just made people book with confidence essentially.
In fact,
और जिस दिन मोदी जी ने लॉकडाउन अनाउंस किया है ना, उस दिन हम आफ्टरनून में एक ऑल हैंड्स मीट कर चुके थे वर्चुअल, जहाँ पे ये भी कॉल ले लिया था कि बिकॉज देयर वाज अनसर्टेनिटी, लोगों को पता था लॉकडाउन तो आने ही वाला है. इट वाज अ मोमेंट बिकॉज द 8 PM had already been announced कि कुछ announcement है, and everybody was anticipating that. People didn't know whether they would have jobs, right? People didn't know whether this virus would affect them and their family and all of that. There was so much uncertainty around that. So we said कि at least एक uncertainty आज खत्म कर देते हैं, because we had a template from GFC days for that, which was कि at least let's go with the approach that we took back then, which was we will keep everybody. and we'll find ways to make the economics work. People may have to sacrifice temporarily, but even in 2008 we gave everybody who sacrificed ESOPs, and it more than compensated. And this time around also we basically applied the same template. Leadership team was very supportive. In fact, many of them took 70%, 80% pay cuts.
In fact, we had invented a salary cut curve basically. So it was not like just a flat X% salary cut. It was dependent on how much you were making. Because the lower you are in the salary bracket, the more you need for survival. And so the cuts were deeper at the top and they were lower at the bottom. And that was a much fairer way of kind of distributing those cuts.
At that time, was it enough cash in the company like to survive?
We didn't let go of anybody. There were salary cuts, but it was not enough to kind of save us. Second is we also had this idea that we are obsessed with customers. So you know what? We're going to go ahead and refund every customer, even if the airline hasn't refunded us yet. Obviously, because airlines were under pressure as well.
Actually, हम अपनी balance sheet से लोगों को refund
हमने
कर
अपने
रहे
balance
थे,
sheet से
without
refund
waiting
दे
for
दिया.
airline.
And so that depleted our cash reserves further. So we were left with
उसके बाद हम less than 6 months पे आ गए.
less than 6 months of salary. That was like almost like suicidal, right?
Even at the time of crisis, you guys have focused on experience. So
You know why we said
refunding
that
from
यार
your own
सबको
balance
मरना ही
sheet.
है ना, तो let's die doing the right things.
Yeah.
So that when
hero's
we,
death.
like बाद में कभी जाके सोते समय सोचना नहीं पड़ेगा यार कुछ गलत किया था.
एक चीज और है यार कि कल्चरल वैल्यूज का टेस्ट ना डिफिकल्ट टाइम्स में ही होता है. हम अपनी कल्चरल वैल्यू कोर एम्पैथी मानते हैं, राइट. दिस वाज द टाइम टू डेमोन्स्ट्रेट दैट वी कैन लिव अप टू दीज. एक होता है कि आपने पोस्टर लगा दी है उसमें एम्पैथी इज एट द सेंटर. वी डोंट हैव एनी पोस्टर्स ऑन आवर वॉल विद कल्चर कोड रिटन ऑन इट, एज यू मे हैव नोटिस्ड, बट वी डू मेक श्योर दैट आवर एक्शंस रिफ्लेक्ट दैट. Right, so that was the moment where, in fact, there was a weekend where our payment gateways ran out of money because refunds were higher than collections, obviously, right? And we had a choice कि Monday तक wait करें to fund because over the weekend I think you could not transfer more than a certain amount for some reason, or should we crowdsource this money in the team and just put it in that account? And everybody from ixigo contributed whatever they could to crowdsource money and refund whatever 40-50 lakhs was pending to the customers over the weekend, because Monday तक आप वेट करा रहे हो, आपको नहीं पता उसमें से कितने कस्टमर्स ऐसे हैं जिनके फैमिली में कोई इस समय हॉस्पिटल में है. I mean that was a call we took कि यार this is the time where we should not care about that, it's about helping everybody.
कोविड के टाइम हमने काफ़ी अपना ब्रांडिंग हमारा काफ़ी हुआ, बिकॉज हमें कुछ करने को था नहीं, सब लोग घर में बनते हैं, तो चटाई लो और 14 घंटे स्टोरी लिखो, 16 घंटे स्टोरी लिखो. तो 6-7-8 months we surprised everybody, right from Times Group to भाई who are these guys,
Right.
और at that point of time people were focusing more worried about health, and तो लगता है हेल्थ को जो होना है वो तो होके ही रहेगा.
So the good thing about every action that we took during this period was कि people remember how you treat them in difficult times.
Correct.
Our customers just came back with a vengeance to book with us. मतलब in that sense, in a good way, they just
Revenge travel.
showed that they trust this platform more than any other. And
Revenge travel सबके लिए था, because this whole concept of YOLO, it people just realize that life is too short, right? And carpe diem. So you know what? Don't spend on material goods. Spend on experiences. That is what would outlast.
कोविड खत्म हो गया, उसके बाद रिवेंज ट्रैवल भी शुरू हुआ, लोग ज़्यादा ट्रैवल करने लगे, तो ixigo भी फॉर श्योर ग्रो करने लगा दोबारा से. तो व्हाट वर द ग्रोथ ड्राइवर्स इन दिस रेस?
But this is a time when end of 2020, most OTAs have still not bounced back. It's still cautious. एक और wave आ रही है, all of that, right?
Correct.
During this time, one interesting thing that happened was we were just having these chats with other entrepreneurs in the space who are facing a similar situation.
Okay.
Like Dinesh and Shripad from Confirm Ticket, or Sudhakar from Abhibus. In fact, everyone was facing the same. Nobody had a template to कि क्या करें.
सबके लिए
It was just crisis थी, तो it was more of a chat where we were both sharing, यार हमारे साथ ऐसा हो रहा है, तुम्हारा कैसा चल रहा है, right? That kind of thing. And we had been talking to these entrepreneurs for a while. I mean, we knew them for at least 2-3 years, right? In that sense. It just so happened that we started discussing, should we just combine forces, because in difficult times, if we are together, we can do something much bigger if things are better in the future. And the interesting thing was, most of these companies, they were bouncing back as fast as us because their template was also very customer centric. They were also very frugal in their thinking, so they had not overspent their way to growth. they had been profitable just before COVID. In fact, we had also turned profitable just before. The companies we acquired also had turned profitable just before. So ये acquisitions पकने लग गए उस time पे in terms of getting to term sheet or getting to okay, we want to do this. Only problem was we didn't have the money, right? So
You
we
raised
are
money for that, I guess.
we actually raised first a venture debt round in early 2021, and then that gave us some cushion to consummate a confirmed ticket acquisition. Then we raised another round, which was raised in parallel with us saying that we are actually thinking of going public, because by that time we were profitable. We had bounced back to above pre-COVID levels.
Is it 53 million round?
This is the round where GIC led the round.
Fosun also invested. I guess.
Fosun exited in that round.
Fosun was earlier invested.
Make My Trip exited in that round. So that happened in 2021, just before, I think, June or July 2021. And then August we acquired Abhibus, and within days of that acquisition we filed our DRHP. So you can imagine that from the time COVID opened, which would as in the first lockdown opened, which was around May-June 2020, June 2020 से August 2021 के बीच में हमने फंड रेज किया, 2 एक्विजिशन करे और एक DRHP फाइल कर दिया. So it was a very intense, and this is all done on Zoom calls / virtual.
When you decided कि अब क्योंकि एक बार IPO का प्लान पहले भी था, but this time
नहीं,
definitely plan
यही प्लान था पहला 2021. उसके पहले कभी प्लान
नहीं
नहीं था.
21 का, लेकिन IPO आगे चल के हुआ.
हाँ, वो
24 में.
So 2021 में हमने IPO फाइल तो कर दिया, अप्रूवल आते आते दिसंबर हो गया, and January 2022, if you remember, all the tech stocks started falling, right? And there was a lot of hue and cry about because the US had started pulling back the money printing cycle.
Yes.
And there was a lot of impact of that on the markets, right? So it was tough to go out in that 2022 time horizon. Though we tried, we spoke to investors, and there were some who were even keen to support us during that time. But we just thought the market is just too choppy at this point to go, and why not wait and go with much better numbers. तो हमने फिर वेट किया, 2.5 साल वेट किया almost.
So I think the best period for ixigo 2021 से लेके 2024 मतलब अभी तक post COVID has been tremendous for you guys, because मेरे को लगता है कि scale भी काफ़ी बड़ा, profitability वगैरह भी है. So can you talk more about that? How you see कि last 5-6 साल काफ़ी amazing गया, last 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, it always looks like that from the outside and in hindsight, but if you look at a bamboo tree, like it grows under the ground for several years before it starts to shoot above the surface, right? And then there's no looking back. So there was a lot of hard work, there's a lot of learning that we had over the years. And then eventually, like, you also need a little bit of luck. I think not everybody it becomes successful or big overnight. So I think a lot of things, maybe COVID was a blessing in disguise for us as well. Like, it helped us rediscover ourselves. We could figure out some innovative things that then became one of the foundations for our growth as well. So I think a lot of things played out, but I think the most important thing is that what we did not change was our obsession with customers and so solving those customer problems. That never changed, right? I think, and that's the only thing that will never ever change. Like, and I don't think there's any company which can actually in any category win unless it's with customer obsession.
Yeah. Right? So you also proved everybody wrong. सब लोगों को लगता था ट्रेन में पैसे नहीं बनेंगे, but look at your quarterly earning. If you look at most of the revenue comes from train. So I think that.
I mean, now buses and flights are growing very well as well.
In fact,
but no, I think it's me. वही है what Rajnish was saying कि look, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I think if you build the right DNA, and unfortunately, right DNA gets built with tough times and sacrifice and going through that. So I think the pain is important. So if any company does not have the fortune or misfortune of going through that pain, they may not end up building that DNA. I mean, we just had a lot of that pain, like at least 3 or 4 times when we ran out of money along the journey. Then there was COVID, GFC, all that drama. IPO bhi first time, we like I think we never got things easy, right? And I think when you never get things easy, you build some muscle, you build more resilience,
Correct.
which becomes useful later on, because then you have a little less fear of crisis, because in fact, sometimes we tell ourselves, we actually are way better in moments of crisis than in moments of abundance. We don't know what to do in moments of abundance. It's not something we have trained ourselves for, right? And that's something we still have to figure out. But I think it's those moments that have shaped the way we look at things, right? So we are not trying to do anything for short term or optics. That's something, which once you have abundance, you always have a temptation to do that, but you have to resist and just say build for the long term.
Correct.
Do the right things, even if it comes with short term pain. And most of these things come with short term pain.
Yeah.
Like Train app was built over like 4 or 5 years. We had very low monetization. We were only building utility. Hotel, last 1.5 to 2 years, we've been building the groundwork to understand just the problems. We have not even scratched the surface on solving the problems in India of what an average mid-tier budget hotel booker actually wants. There is no trust that exists for any OTA today, right? Because those guys are just walking into hotels and checking out rooms because there is no trust. So there are problems that exist out there in every domain. It takes a while to identify those problems. You have to immerse yourself, and we had to spend time at railway stations talking to people to understand some of these problems. And it takes a while to solve them. Nothing gets built overnight, right? Of course, now with AI, you can accelerate building things, but still, it takes a while to iterate and get to that product market fit where the aha moment comes for the user. It may take years, it may take several quarters, right? But we are not shy of doing that and investing in that, because the moat comes from that if you think about it. It's not.
If we look at your journey, 17 saal ho gaye hain, you guys have been together. This is also rare across Indian startup. We have seen founding team, after a decade or after public or even, reaching to a certain milestone, Series D level sort of. Most of the founding team, get split, and maybe 1 or 2 people of original founding team have been leading the company. So how you see this? Because it's very rare.
It's been 15 long years, or maybe more than that.
Up to
17,
20 years,
28
2006 they started.
28 years that we know each other now.
2006 they started. So it's,
but
it's
even
20
from
years.
the journey perspective, it's almost 19 plus years. No, I think you have to.
आजकल शादियां भी इतनी नहीं चलती है.
मतलब ये एक तरह की शादी ही है.
हाँ, बिल्कुल.
Co-founder relationship is because you have to.
How do you define that, the relation with co-founder?
You have to understand each other really well as to your strengths and weaknesses. You need to be self-aware of that, and you have to know when to step in and when to step back. I think it just boils down to that.
Correct.
You, Rajnish, your take on this?
My take on this is that I think everybody brings some value, and I think generally in founding teams, I think those teams assemble because they bring some value, which are slightly different. Because if you think about if same kind of people start a company, there's more chances of them kind of falling apart. Because they would be experts in the same thing, or they think less like in the same way. For example, if both of them are optimistic, they will end up crashing and burning. If both of them are pessimistic, they won't grow. For example, there needs to be a balance. So I think that we do have that balance. So we bring some contrarian views and different ways of looking at things. That's one thing. The other thing is that I think it's always important to have. I would not start alone, because there is also like this massive burden of responsibility of every decision that you take along the way, and that burden is very, very heavy. And ultimately it gets very lonely at the top. So if you have somebody to share that with, it always helps. And if that works out, then that relationship obviously nurtures and grows over a period of time. But ultimately, I think if you think about it, like for most of the companies where people have stepped out or gone away, whether it was single founder, multiple founder, I think it's also because like everybody starts by thinking about building something, and somewhere along the way there is this notion of achievement or success which is defined by metrics like money and fundraise and wealth creation, right? And then what happens is that, and I've seen a lot of my friends in my network who actually built companies, sold them, made lots of money. And then they were in depression for a while because what they realized is that they were not really after wealth creation. Actually, what they were after was a purpose in life. And the moment they achieved it, they had no purpose left. And that left them completely empty. And so that, it doesn't matter what you're building along the way, if you make money or not, etc. But if you have something to look forward to every single day, everybody needs that. Nobody wants to retire. Like, what do you do after you retire? Right? I mean, you'll have to wake up in the morning and do something, right?
Yeah.
If that something is this, then so be it. Like, I mean, that's what makes you happy. That what gives you a purpose, sense of purpose. Then that's what it is.
As we're talking about understanding, bonding, responsibility, there was a time when you both just mortgage your apartments and to run the company. So what was that situation, and what was your thought on this?
Yeah, there was this fundraise round which was taking forever. So we'd anticipated we would close it in probably 2-3 months, but it took longer than that, and we were out of money. And I don't think we even shared that one. We didn't even share with our
I don't know how that thing came out.
we just got lucky that it finally came through. But we said ki maybe it's one more month of salaries that we need to fund, and actually we had to mortgage our apartments and put in some money at that time. But we felt that it was the right thing to do because we were very close to closing that, and we were very optimistic about it, which finally did happen.
मतलब कोई ऐसा बहुत बड़ा रिस्क था नहीं जितना like it's been painted like something that was. I think we had that line of sight that it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a risk. Like, who would want mortgage their homes for their companies? Right? It's like not a very commonplace decision anywhere.
So in 19 years, कभी ऐसा लगा कि कोई और आइडिया परसू करते हैं किसी को apart from
Rose.
मतलब some other startup या कुछ और outside परसू करो.
You always have, like, if you are an entrepreneur, if you're full of ideas, creative, you will find. I mean, I've seen my ideas getting implemented every year.
Yeah. So life में ऐसा लगता है कि ixigo ही बनाते रहना है या फिर there would be something.
But ixigo के अंदर ही बहुत डिफरेंट चीजें बन रही है ना. मतलब इट्स नॉट द सेम ixigo as even 5 years ago.
But कभी लगेगा ट्रेवल से थक के कुछ और करें कुछ.
But we have not just built ixigo. We built ixigo mafia.
Yeah.
Ixigo mafia is very big.
I know at least 10 people from ixigo who have been doing entrepreneurship.
There would be 10 more.
Yeah, be at least 25.
I know 10 people here in Gurgaon who are doing startups.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I have huge respect for them because on the lines of you guys, they are also building frugal, frugal businesses, because पैसा झोंक के तो कोई भी business बना सकता है sort of in a short term. But I think that comes from the culture, that comes from the DNA. And I think ixigo mafia, you were saying 25 companies, 30 companies. I think 15-20 को तो हम जानते होंगे जो कि गुड़गांव, बैंगलोर.
And you know what? It's crazy to think that a company of our scale, we're not a PayPal or a Google, right?
Yeah.
So the amount of companies that have churned out of this company and is insane. Like, it's very, very big. And I reflected upon this as to why that was happening. And I realized that there were a few things that were happening inside ixigo that was making it happen. So we always had this culture of openness and transparency, right? Which means that anybody who's working inside ixigo has the ability to see what's happening in every place, every function, every department. And so they have this ability to see how a company grows and goes from point A to point B.
Yeah.
That knowledge is gold.
Yeah.
That knowledge gives them the ability to think about what happens inside a company so that it's able to kind of push itself from A to B.
Yeah.
What does it take to do that?
Yeah, it's a blueprint.
It's a blueprint, and that gives them the confidence. So there's something I call capability realization. The moment you see something like this and your own learnings, it gets you to a point where you reach this capability realization where you say that, yes, if these guys can do, and we are not superhuman anyway, right? And we usually hire people who are smarter than us. So they think that if these guys can do it, we can also do it, right? And that's the other thing. The other thing was, inside the company, at least a lot of these startups which have formed outside, they have come out of ideas that were created inside ixigo. Why? Because our frugality, it prevents us from going and buying software off the shelf, any SaaS. So we end up building them inside. Some of those ideas then become the inception for some of people to come and go out, and so it also goes against us, right, in some sense. But that's the other region. So this creativity or idea, innovative ideas that keep coming inside the company, that's the other seed. And the third thing is, almost everybody important that we hired, they always bring in somebody whom they know closely.
Yeah.
That's the best hire you can usually get, right? Because
You get referral hire.
yes, referral hire is probably the best source of hiring. So generally, all those people inside, they have an ecosystem of very close people and friends that, so their potential co-founders are sitting right inside. Again, this works against us because when people leave, they leave in, you know, herds and groups, right?
But this is the only one good reason for leaving where we don't sort of have a long discussion with people.
There's this unsaid thing on the floor that if you're leaving, never go and tell that you found another job, because I'll find a way to convince them to stay back and brainwash them. But if they say that I'm going to start my own company, we don't do anything. There's no conversation, because that would be very egoistic. So I'm telling you that, you know, don't go out and start your own company. Stay back and work for me, for my company. Right? That's not. That's very selfish.
So how the life has changed when ixigo became a public company from a private?
कुछ change हुआ है?
बहुत सारी चीजें तो वैसी ही है, मतलब कुछ change तो खास
But
है।
I'm talking about at the company level, because you know.
I think internally, you know, if you ask people, I don't think there have been any major changes except for the fact कि you know, जो हमारा transparency का culture है, you know, now that what that means is that a lot of people who have access to, let's say, our financial information, you know, we have to be more careful about curtailing that, but we've never had that culture. हमारे यहाँ सब कुछ internally, everybody used to know everything. But that is something hygiene every company has to do. There's a lot of noise outside. I think that has changed the noise level about us. Like we were never used to this much sort of inbound requests.
Yeah, so many podcasts and conferences.
Conferences, investors wanting to meet. I think, and I've tried to shield Rajnish and the rest of the people from some of that, because you know there's just too much noise out there. But beyond that, nothing. I mean, if you ask me, has it changed the way we do anything at ixigo? No.
What would be your advice to companies which are going public? जो कि दो चार चीजें जो उनको काफी ख्याल रखना चाहिए.
Don't obsess about it, because actually it's the same thing. Nothing changes. In fact, we took this call when we rang the bell that, you know what, we're not going to look at the stock price. Because if you look at the stock price, you're looking at something that you don't control. Right? The only thing you control is what's in your hands, which is execution. Everything else is an output metric, basically, right? So I think that's the only advice we would give to anybody, which is the same pre-IPO.
Focus on execution.
Focus on execution. Focus on what's
Don't bother
important for
about
you.
noise and what's happening.
Signal to noise ratio अच्छा रखना पड़ेगा. मतलब that is more important, because the noise will only increase. So you know, in fact, people shouldn't go public if they can't handle that. And people shouldn't go public if they are more obsessed about you know, what people feel about them as opposed to, you know, because if you're building something and you don't worry too much about what do others think about this, right, and you're building for the long term, then if you execute well over the next few quarters after going public, like 4 or 5 quarters, you are able to show that whatever you said, you're able to deliver. I think the market builds more confidence in you. I mean, that's something we have learned. So more important than the moment you go public is what do you do after that, because that's just the start of a new journey. In fact, Rajnish gave this analogy at the IPO that it's almost like coming out to bat for a new innings, right? And one inning is already over, but this inning matters more because everybody is watching you now.
Correct.
Earlier, you know,
More set of
the limelight was not on you.
Yeah.
Now the limelight is on you, but don't let that pressure change the way you do things, right? Because that is also something that you will have people asking questions about everything in these earnings calls and analyst calls, but don't change your strategy to please the market.
Pressure can only make you lose the match, right? Last day of test, 9 wicket down, 50 run banane. What do? Do you save the wicket or do you go for the win? I mean, that's
Go
the
for the win.
front foot versus back foot scenario, right?
ixigo's IPO was a great success, like 82x subscription, profitability on the charts.
98.3x subscription.
To be precise, 98.3. So many of retail investors are investing. QIB से भी अच्छा सपोर्ट था, सब सारे बॉक्स टिक थे. तो और कंपनी अच्छा भी कर रही है, 2 क्वार्टर है, 2 नंबर प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी बुक करी है, until unless that exception of that exception by item जो थी उनकी. Are you ever scared of disappointing public expectations? कि अब तो पब्लिक भी जुड़ी है मेरे साथ, अब तो सब being a public company list हो गए हम, retail का पैसा है, तो इस पे
See, what has worked for us is when we even did the IPO, we went in with very low expectations. In fact, it was a price discovery process for us because we had not raised like a lot of money in subsequent rounds. Last round was 2021, the GIC round, and we had not raised any money subsequently for 3 years. So it was a price discovery process, and we discovered that people, do put a certain value on us that was above what we thought it was, right? And but I don't think we get obsessed about, the share price. Like Rajnish said, that's something we don't even look at. So expectation versus reality matters more over the long term. So if over the long term, my thesis is that next billion users that today are buying train and bus are tomorrow going to buy flight and hotel through me, and that has been playing out over the last few years already. That thesis is the thesis on the market if you think about it. Because India has played out that way. We used to travel on trains before we had jobs, and today, we can afford to fly.
You are obsessed about experience and product mostly, and you guys always focused on execution, not bothering about outside world, even after going public, not seeing stock prices and all. But 5 years down the line, let's say you will be obsessed about product and experiences. That's fine. But where do you see ixigo Group 5 years down the line in terms of market cap and all, if there is any wish, because you guys are already over $1 billion. So because
if you asked me this question 5 years ago also, I would have not said current market price, and today also I'm not going to say anything, because I think if we execute the vision that we articulated well, right, we will get whatever market cap we deserve as a result. But that should not be something we obsess about.
It's directly proportional to execution and what you do.
Also, in today's world, forget about 5 years. I can't even predict what's going to happen in 5 months.
But I just as a founder, I thought if I would, if we get a sneak peek into what you guys thinking 5 years down the line.
I think that's again an output metric.
Yeah. Of course. Thanks. पूरे ट्रैवल स्पेस में हमने कोई इनोवेशन नहीं देखा पिछले 10-15 साल में, मतलब लिटरली, मतलब जो OTA आ रहे हैं वो OTA चले. आपका इनोवेशन लास्ट है कि आपने OTA पिवट किया. ड्यूरिंग 2013-15 पीरियड वी यूज्ड टू सी कंपनी लाइक हॉलीडेफाई और भी कंटेंट में कुछ कंपनियां, आइटनरीज में कंपनियां. बट is it over in travel space? There is no white spaces now.
It's never over in any
Why
space.
We are not seeing any experiment, any good company in this space? If you guys have discovered someone in India, please enlighten us.
But they would be, and I think now more than ever, because the barriers to entry for building companies, building products is disappearing.
Yeah.
Because AI is commoditizing execution. Maybe those companies are too small. So I'll tell you what's happening in travel. Most of the innovation that people are talking about in travel, especially with respect to AI, is in an area which the OTAs were anyway not into. That was the inspirational part of travel, which is that where should I go? What would my itinerary of 5 days look like? No OTA was doing that anyway in the past, right? And that use case today is become a poster child for most of the horizontal AI companies, because it's very easy for people to relate to use cases like that, right? But that use case has never cannibalized any OTA.
Yeah.
Right? It's a new use case that in the previous world was actually happening offline. The inspirational bit of travel or planning an itinerary used to happen because you go to Bali and then you'll talk to me on the phone. And then I say, oh, what did you do? Where did you go? And that's how my planning starts, right? And that offline, or maybe on a sofa, or maybe over a coffee, etc. And that offline planning phase moved to Instagram when Instagram came in the form of reels and inspirations like that. That thing is now moving to AI platforms, which is what the big, the whole noise around that, AI is doing travel is about that. Now, if you think about it, like who is better positioned to do these things? An online travel agency or platform like ixigo or Booking, we are far better positioned to actually recommend an itinerary or to build an itinerary, because we have far more data, vertical data about where people are actually going, what they're booking, etc., than any horizontal AI platform. Right?
Yeah.
And so if you are able to build vertically a platform within travel, which is full stack all the way to the top of the funnel, you should be able to acquire customers much more easily and with a much lower cost of acquisition, because you're now acquiring customers at the top of the funnel, which is much bigger. Usually remember that a person comes to ixigo today or booking when they know where they're headed, and where they know the dates exactly.
Yeah.
We are really at the bottom of the funnel, right?
Yeah.
And so the opportunity with AI also is that I can actually become more full stack as a travel platform, end to end, and own the entire experience.
You come from Bihar, Betia, studied in Patna, schooled in Patna, and then moved to IIT. So share your, school days experiences, something.
I don't know, it was like nothing to complain about. I went to an extremely shitty school in my early days. It was like a hole in the wall kind of a school. But that didn't matter, because you have fun with your friends and your life. Childhood is always fun, right? I think what was key, and I think that was the journey of most of us, like from that era, was that I think the economy was seeing this boom of IT services, right? Before that boom happened, the only goal every person in Bihar would for at least have would be for their kids to become a civil service servant, right?
Yeah.
And the only goal would be UPSC.
Yeah.
I still remember that, I used to live with my grandmother, my grandparents, and my uncles. And when I was in 5th class, they started buying Competition Success Review, and they started making me do reasoning, etc., because they were preparing me to prepare for civil services, UPSC.
That was common in most of
That was very common. And then one fine day, like when I was in 7th, 8th, etc., 6th, 7th, suddenly the goalposts changed. Now suddenly everybody said, the IT services are booming and the job opportunities are much bigger in the IT services, which means you need to do engineering. Now engineering meant that you need to get into IIT. So then like suddenly from UPSC, the goalpost shifted to J. So essentially, if you think about everybody's childhood and education, nobody ever had a choice. Like, do you want to become a cricketer? Did anybody ask you? Nobody asked you, right? The only goalpost was, it's now UPSC is over. Now it's about JEE. So go ahead and start preparing for JEE, because that is the ultimate goalpost. If you get there, your life is set.
When you came Patna from Betia?
Actually, I was born in Patna. Okay. My parents were from Betia,
Sure.
but I was born in Patna.
What is the coolest place for you in Patna to hang out in those days?
My home.
Of course, outside home.
Apart from
I didn't talk about your home.
So our school was, St. Michael. So there was this, riverside thing that we used to kind of stop before coming back home and cross that and look at the river and sit there, and that was.
That is the Ganges.
The Ganges River. And also sometimes, maybe bunk a little bit and watch a movie, etc. Those were like some of the things.
And which place is the coolest for you now in Patna? Almost 30 years down the line.
Still my home.
Now, apart from home, we are not talking about.
We have created like a cricket pitch on the rooftop.
Okay.
And so every time I go back to Patna, I go with my brothers and we play cricket.
Okay.
That's the coolest.
Just like the old days.
Just like the old days.
And what was the oldest memory which you fondly remember from those days, Patna days? It changed a lot. Bihar has changed a lot in the last 2-3 decades.
I think it has to be the school days, hanging out with friends. Playing cricket was like one of the best, one of the most, biggest pastime.
You like bowling or batting?
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
Everybody's all rounder.
Everybody's all rounder.
Your Aloke, childhood and early school life.
Childhood, I was born in Prayagraj, then called Allahabad, and then lived in Kenya also for about 4.5 years. My dad was transferred there. He was in Bank of Baroda and he got transferred there. So grew up a bit in Africa and then came back to India in Kanpur for the next few years of my life, where I did my schooling and went to IIT as well in Kanpur. So a lot of fond memories from Kanpur. Kanpur, I think Kanpur more than a city is an emotion, and you have to live there to know what I'm talking about. But there's lots of right from the language to the food, lots to reminisce about, and lots to go back to. I try to go back once a year. Similar memories from childhood. I think gully cricket, which I think is something disappearing now, even in tier 2 cities.
Yeah.
But even at the age of like 10, 11, we would just go and fearlessly go anywhere we wanted to in the near neighborhood and play with whatever we could find. Even if we didn't have a bat, we would just invent one with a wooden.
The innovation in the wicket was actually mind blowing back in the days.
हाँ,
I don't know how many different kinds of wickets were
बहुत
invented.
तरह के.
ईंट पत्थर कुछ भी
हाँ, कुछ भी.
Just drawing on the wall sometimes.
So
Most of the times.
when you guys did college together, तो college time की कुछ fond memories.
अरे बहुत
I heard about एक वो he gave the wing hostel name some iconic name.
Yeah,
What was that?
Rangdar.
Why you chose that name?
Everybody was a Rangdar in our group because everybody had a mind of their own.
Mind of their own.
So that it just kind of made sense because I mean it was fun. It was a fun group.
लालू era का influence था क्या वो?
पता नहीं, like, but there were 2-3 Biharis in the group, 4, I think 4 maybe, 4 or 5. But I think one thing that was common in our group and between the two of us was also that none of us were studying very hard at IIT and none of us were getting great grades either.
So there was no 9 point someone.
We were not that 9 point something kind of people. So
I think we had a lot of fun. I think IIT days were a lot of fun. I think we learned more outside the classes than inside the classes, if you ask me.
I think that's the case. It all takes to get into Stanford or IIT. और अंदर जाने के बाद फिर chill करने का.
Chill तो नहीं है because it was academically.
That was a hard realization. The moment we landed, we thought life was set because we got into IIT, and then first semester really bad grades, and then that's a wake up call. Oh shit.
आजकल लोग drop out कर जाते हैं. You guys have thought about it?
वो भी है.
आपने सोचा था क्या अपने टाइम में?
नहीं.
It was a big risk. Nobody could afford it.
You can't because there is so much at stake. You know, you would never do that because your parents, they have invested so much in you so that you can go and study there and come out of there and make a good living. You don't want to do. It's the same pressure, social pressure that people had to preserve their marriage.
An entire generation was
Exactly
at
the same
stake
thing.
basically there.
Yeah.
Like we are both from ordinary middle class backgrounds, right? I mean, and for us, this was the gateway to do something much bigger in life and have a better life for ourselves and our kids, right? So we couldn't flunk it. So we tried very hard to just make sure we got enough grades to not flunk.
जब आपने entrepreneurship choose किया होगा तो बिहार में तो ये I think people have opposed it very vehemently.
At that point, I think in the whole of the country, right? No, I don't think our entrepreneurship
What was your parents' take on that?
My parents are like, I think I'm fortunate that they've always supported everything that I've decided to do in my life, whether it is choosing a job or a profession or a partner.
That's fine. What was the society call on it?
We didn't care about society.
घर में रिश्तेदार तो बोलते ही होंगे वैसा क्या है?
Nobody cared. We did have, so I remember that once I met a relative who came to visit us while I was still running, and he was and he asked me that, what do you do? And I said, like, we have a startup that we are running. They said, does it make money? I said, no, not yet. And so, can you show me roughly what the P&L? I said, and then he says that, why are you doing this? Go and find a job, stable job, and make some money. So that was his advice, and my parents were sitting right there, so that was not very helpful because either way my parents were supportive, but they were worried in some sense that I've not been drawing salary for a few years, and and we are not financially so well off either. I had 2 brothers that I had to support their education, etc. as well. So it's never an easy decision that way. But I think behind all of these things, there's always somebody who didn't do anything directly to build your company, but if they were not supportive, you would not be able to build a company.
It was hard to convince in-laws or शादी के वक्त?
Nah, they're even more chill.
Oh, cool. आपको?
I think the parents were very supportive. I mean, in fact, when we were starting out in the apartment nearby, my mom actually came and camped with us and made sure that we were all well.
We ate a lot of ghee.
we were all well fed while we were building the startup, right? And to that extent, and my dad has also always been, a strong pillar of support in that sense. So I think we had full support from the family. I mean, I stayed at my sister's place for almost a year because I couldn't afford rent. So I think without them, I don't think it would have been possible for us to have the moral courage to keep doing it despite not having financially much to talk about for many years, right? And even when we both got married, like financially we were barely, I don't think our wives knew, but we were not very well off, just barely sort of surviving in that sense, right? And I think they have been strong pillars of support as well, through thick and thin. So that's, I think, very critical in the life of an entrepreneur, because you have so much to deal with in office, and you go back home, you want that to be your comfort zone where you can be who you are, right? So thankfully, we both got that in our families.
What would be your advice? Because employment is a big issue in Bihar and northern state, Bihar, UP mostly. So I think we as a state need more entrepreneurs from Bihar because they can create more job opportunities and all. So what would be your advice to budding entrepreneurs who are trying to make a dent from Bihar and from India?
In terms of starting up or in terms of
starting up, जो भी entrepreneurship के बारे में थोड़ा क्या आप
got it. I think
आपने देखा ये mainstream हुआ है क्या बिहार में थोड़ा इधर?
I don't think that Kida is still that prevalent. But if you think about it, I think not about the location. I think people from Bihar generally tend to move out because when they're like the education.
We are Naukri oriented mostly as a
so
state.
they or even education. I think nobody stays in Patna for higher education, right? So they would go to some IIT in somewhere, right? So all of the brains are there outside anyway, right? And so they're starting up. So that's the thing. I don't think there's any reverse brain drain happening in Bihar. So there's no ecosystem where people are going back and giving it back and starting there. That's not happening.
Do you think this is the need of the hour?
It should be. I think that there is a need to give it back because I think I've seen Bihar, and if you think about over the last several decades, right? I keep visiting every year. I go to it and see a lot of development has happened. But the reality is that, we probably would have been much further ahead, right? Remember, we were the capital of Magad back in the days.
We have all great glory, history.
Yeah, like it was the center of the world at one point of time, right? So from there to here, there's still a lot to recover, right? And I guess all the people who went out, if they can give it back to their, mother state, then maybe something can happen. But in general, I think to people who are starting up, the only advice I have is I see a lot of people doing moonlighting and doing jobs and then trying to figure out a way in which they can do something on the side, a side hustle, etc. That never works. And I think for us, I think what we realized, and like I was telling the story about how we got into this consulting vicious circle, right? You've got to remove those safety nets, right? Because and ultimately a lot of people get married to an idea and they think that if they don't have a killer idea, they should not start up. And that's also a big myth.
How to identify which is the killer idea?
There is no idea. I don't think it's about the idea. It's about the mindset of taking that plunge. If you're ready to risk it all, right? That's the idea. Because once you remove all safety nets and take that plunge, you will eventually find something. No company started with the exact same idea that they have right now. Nokia was not a phone company. Now I don't even know what kind of company it is. But I'm saying no company started with that. They always pivoted, right? Ultimately, we started with the idea that we will build a GDS. We never even touched that idea once we actually left our jobs and started, because we pivoted multiple times. And think about it. We started with the idea of GDS, ended up building a meta search, which now became an innovative OTA.
Yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't really matter in the end. And the second learning advice that I would give is that never give up. Never give up, because we've come back from almost certain death, one day more and we would be dead. And we didn't give up, and we just figured out something that got us out of that situation, right? And we survived.
Aloke, why you called yourself Cockroach startup at some point of time? What was the motivation behind that?
I think this was a time when people were obsessed about becoming a unicorn.
Yeah.
And we just felt that unicorn was essentially something linked to a valuation number, which I believe is a meaningless goal to chase, right? And therefore, like we never discussed this word internally ever as an objective or a goal or nothing.
The only
right?
place
Never,
I discussed
ever.
this number, this name
That
was
only came on the medium
And
blog.
fortunately, we never became a unicorn because
Yeah.
technically you have to be a private company worth $1 billion to be a unicorn.
But
So, we escaped that.
After going public,
you surpassed the $1 billion
But
mark
just to
after.
come to this, I think we wanted to create an alternate template because look, there is something unique about the way we've built the business. It may not be the sexiest way of building it.
But one of the way.
But the delayed gratification and going through the pain is worth it. And just to add to what Rajnish was saying, I think today's youth that's building startups needs to realize that you have to learn delayed gratification. You have to in fact pray that you will go through some pain because it's going to build the right muscle, right? Don't expect everything to be hunky-dory. Don't expect that, within 2 or 3 years, I'll build something big. 99% of the time that doesn't happen, but that doesn't mean you have failed,
Yeah.
right? So
You kept trying.
I think that's the crux of the story, and that's where a cockroach, by definition, will go through all that and still survive, figure out, change itself, metamorphose itself. And cockroaches can fly as well, right? So it's not, it's not that cockroaches can't fly, but I think the world needs, stories where, the ambition is not just geared towards building valuation. If you just chase valuation, I don't think you fundamentally are obsessed about building value. The valuation comes after you build value. Build value for your customers. The valuation will follow.
Yeah.
But if you get obsessed about that, more likely than not, I've seen things go sideways.
Yeah. What is culture? How you define briefly in 2-3 sentences?
Culture is what you do, right? What you do is who you are. So it's not about posters on the wall. It's not about saying that these are my cultural attributes, but actually living them. And it starts at the top. So if the founding team, the leadership team lives those values, it seeps down and that becomes your culture over time.
So first 5 questions would be from Rajnish sir. Train, flight, buses, pick one personally.
Personally, no, I don't do that because I've got a team. The moment I pick one, I'll be on the spot, so can't pick.
A financial metric you check daily without fail.
Financial metric? I think before financial metric, there's one metric that I check more often, that is the NPS.
NPS.
Okay.
A feature on ixigo you are most proud of.
Again, this is going to divide the team because if I choose a flight feature versus a train feature versus bus, I think it's going to divide the team.
But we have to choose one.
Yeah, he's playing so safe.
I've got a team.
One thing your family still doesn't understand about your job.
Yeah, why do I get upset in meetings?
Okay. A startup founder you truly respect.
Oh, lots of them out there. Like, if I have to name one, I would say
Aloke?
Brian Chesky.
Okay. If you weren't running ixigo, what would you be doing today?
I can't think of anything there actually. Perhaps I would be like, बचपन में एक ड्रीम थी कि आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट बनूंगा. I still love history and I read a lot of like William Dalrymple kind of books, right? So perhaps I would become an archaeologist.
A word your team hears you say way too often.
Get it done?
As soon as possible. Right here, right now.
एक idea है.
Okay.
A founder you would love to take a 5-hour train journey.
With?
And why?
Rajnish?
Not.
Okay.
Rajnish is a very common answer.
Why not Elon Musk?
Okay, and why?
So much to learn from from him, right? I don't know if a train journey would be enough, but I would prefer to take him on a train journey because it will take longer.
One everyday habit that makes you more productive.
I think having just 2 or 3 things that I really want to do in that day, in the beginning of the day, checking that list and ticking it off at the end, saying, did I get those 3 things done at least?
Okay. The toughest part about building a travel product in India. These are supposed to be quick answers.
Not, yeah, but you know, there are many tough things. So I think the toughest part is understanding the part of the market that doesn't book online yet.
One last question from my side. Are Gen Z difficult to work with?
I don't think we should stereotype Gen Z or millennial or something like that. I think people in general.
मैं सिंपल कर देता हूँ, वो लोग जो 95 के बाद पैदा हुआ.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter. 95 के पहले वाले लोगों में भी प्रॉब्लम हो सकती है. 95 के बाद वाले में भी प्रॉब्लम हो सकती है. But I think, see, the core is that if you understand people, their ambition and their aspirations in life, and if you're able to align those goals internally inside your organization, then you'll see value being created. If you ask a fish to bark a tree, that's not going to happen. So you've got to play to people's strength. And I think some of those people have those kind of strengths. They're very creative. They have ideas and they have this ability to kind of relentlessly go and pursue something. They won't stop until it happens. So you can use that energy and play to their strengths, right? And that's true for people born before 95, before 85, after 2000 as well. So yeah, thank you so much.
It was very wonderful conversation.
It was very
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, we wrap up the second podcast with the co-founders of ixigo. We covered their early life, toughest nights, founders bond, IPO journey, and everything in between. Hope you like this episode. See you in the next one. Until then, please like, share, and subscribe.